There are certain turning points in life when a person steps into your world, and in that very instant, the whole idea of coincidence quietly dissolves. You can try to take the timeline apart piece by piece, applying reason and logic to explain how it all came together. You can search for the practical, sensible explanation for why your paths crossed the way they did. But somewhere underneath all that reasoning, a quieter part of you already knows that logic was never truly the force driving any of it. This person didn't simply wander into your life by chance. They arrived carrying a kind of certainty, an unspoken weight, and in that arrival, something shifted deep inside you. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was permanent. Even now, as you try to keep walking forward, as you tell yourself over and over that this story has already ended, as you talk yourself through the logic of the separation, there's still something pulling your attention back toward them. It isn't desperation creating that pull, it's recognition, a sense of knowing that goes deeper than circumstance. And if these words have found you today, that isn't accidental either. The moments that matter most in life tend to arrive exactly when the soul is finally ready to make sense of them. Carl Jung once said that the person who looks only outward spends their life dreaming, while the one who dares to look inward finally begins to wake up. And right now, something within you is beginning to stir in exactly that way, quietly, persistently, refusing to be ignored. There is a kind of inner knowing that does not accept silence easily, no matter how long that silence stretches on. It's a feeling that this connection was never meant to disappear from your memory without leaving something behind. You might find yourself standing at an emotional crossroads, torn in two directions. One part of you wanting to hold on, another part telling you it's time to let go. You might feel caught between trusting what you felt so deeply and doubting whether any of it was even real. Silence has a way of deepening that uncertainty. Distance has a way of making even the strongest emotions question their own legitimacy. You may have asked yourself, quietly, whether you imagined the depth of the connection, whether you created meaning where none actually existed. But here is the truth beneath that doubt. If it had only been imagination, it would not have survived this long. Illusions cannot withstand the pressure of time. What isn't real eventually fades away on its own, without effort, without resistance. And yet, this hasn't faded. It has remained, quietly present, refusing to disappear no matter how much time has passed. And because it has remained, some deeper part of you refuses to release it, no matter how many times you've tried. Time has not weakened it. Pain has not managed to erase it. Distance has not freed you from its hold. In fact, every attempt you've made to move away from it seems to circle back to the very same quiet understanding that this person still matters to you. Not as some fleeting emotional reaction of the mind, but as a recognition rising from somewhere much deeper within you. This is not obsession, and it never was. Obsession is loud, it is restless, it demands and grasps and refuses to rest. What you're feeling is nothing like that. What you feel is quiet. It lives beneath your conscious thoughts, beneath your fears, beneath whatever expectations you once had. It surfaces in moments of stillness, in dreams you can't quite explain, in unexpected waves of emotion that rise up without warning and just as quickly settle again. It feels unfinished, like something meaningful that never got to fully express itself. Think back to when you first crossed paths with this person. Something old, something almost ancient within you, responded instantly. It wasn't simple attraction. It wasn't a logical checklist being matched point by point. It was a familiarity that had no explanation, as though some part of you had recognized them long before this lifetime, this meeting, this moment in time. The conversation itself may have seemed ordinary on the surface, but the energy underneath it was anything but. Your entire system picked up on two things simultaneously: intensity and safety, existing together, and that rare combination is exactly what leaves a lasting imprint on a person. Jung once described the meeting of two people as being like the contact between two chemical substances. If any reaction occurs at all, both substances are transformed by it. And that transformation is exactly what happened to you. Whether it shows outwardly or not, they were changed too, in ways they may not even fully understand yet. Connections powerful enough to alter us are never casual, never meaningless. They rearrange something inside us. They open internal doors that cannot fully close again, no matter how much time passes or how much distance grows between two people. So even now, even in the silence, even across whatever distance separates you, a connection continues quietly beneath the surface, undisturbed by circumstance. Some people process their emotions outwardly, expressing everything as it happens. Others process inwardly, holding everything close, revealing very little. Silence does not always mean the absence of feeling. Sometimes it simply means the feeling is too large, too overwhelming to put into words. You awaken something in them that they were not prepared to hold, something they didn't know how to carry. And instead of moving toward that feeling, instead of leaning into it, they pulled back from it. They believed, perhaps, that creating distance would quiet what they were experiencing. But energy doesn't vanish simply because someone chooses to ignore it. In their quiet moments, when distractions fade and there's nothing left to hide behind, thoughts of you still rise to the surface. Not because they consciously choose to think of you, but because the connection surfaces naturally, on its own, without invitation. They remember the conversations you shared. They remember what it felt like to actually be seen, to be understood without having to explain themselves. And they notice, whether they admit it or not, the stark contrast between how being near you felt and how empty everything else around them feels in comparison. That contrast creates real discomfort within them. Not because they don't care about you, but because they care more deeply than they know how to process. Underneath the surface, they carry their own internal struggles, old emotional wounds that were never fully healed, a fear of vulnerability, a fear of losing control over their own emotions, a fear of being exposed in ways they don't yet feel ready to face. For some people, love simply doesn't feel safe. Not because of anything the other person did or didn't do, but because of what love itself awakens within them. This is often where powerful, meaningful connections become complicated. One person begins to wake up emotionally, while the other resists what is being reflected back at them, unable or unwilling to face it directly. You became a mirror for them, whether either of you realized it at the time. You reflected emotions they had never fully processed, feelings they had buried long before you ever entered their life. And rather than face that reflection honestly, rather than sit with what it revealed, they stepped back from it entirely. Jung explained this exact pattern when he said that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will continue to direct our lives from the shadows, and we will call it fate, never realizing it was something within us all along, waiting quietly to be understood. They can feel that your energy isn't waiting around the way it used to. And strangely enough, that's exactly what makes the connection start to feel more real to them. It's no longer something they can take for granted, no longer something that's just automatically there whenever they decide to reach for it. Now it's something that actually has to be chosen deliberately, and that shift changes everything. This is the point where emotional honesty starts rising to the surface. The walls people build start to crack a little. Memories that used to feel painful or resisted begin returning with a kind of softness instead. The pull to repair things, to reconnect, starts growing quietly in the background. You might notice your own emotions moving in waves during this time, stretches of calm, followed by sudden bursts of intensity. That's not something going wrong. That's integration happening in real time. You're no longer completely swept up inside the connection, but you haven't cut yourself off from it either. You're finding the middle ground. You're learning what it means to let something exist without needing to control how it turns out. And that particular state, that balance, holds real power. It signals that you're ready for whatever truth shows up, in whatever form it decides to take. The path between you two isn't actually blocked the way it might feel. It's simply unfolding, slowly, beneath the surface. Old misunderstandings are dissolving on their own. Resistance that used to feel solid is starting to loosen. What once felt chaotic and unpredictable is quietly organizing itself, even if you can't consciously track how or when that's happening. At this stage in the process, there is nothing left for you to force. No proving yourself, no chasing, no trying to convince anyone of anything. Just presence. Just staying honest with yourself. Stay open, but stop chasing. Everything else is unfolding at its own pace, in its own rhythm. Don't rush what's already moving on its own, because anything that's truly meant for you was never going to need force behind it in the first place. It shows up in its own timing, in its own way, when it's ready. As this stage of the journey continues, you may start to feel it differently, not as longing anymore, but as a quiet certainty that settles somewhere inside you. A kind of knowing that doesn't need constant reassurance. A trust that no longer depends on signs or confirmation or proof from the outside. Something is quietly moving toward alignment. Not rushed, not forced, not under any kind of pressure, just natural, just real. There comes a point where the longing itself softens and slowly turns into understanding. Not because the connection means any less to you, but because your relationship to it has changed. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start feeling, almost without noticing, that this is happening for you. That shift might seem small on the surface, but internally, it changes everything. It's the exact moment pain starts turning into awareness, and confusion starts turning into clarity. You begin to realize this connection was never meant to swallow your entire identity. It was meant to show you something, to reveal where you had abandoned yourself in the past, to expose old patterns you'd been repeating without noticing, and to help you finally see the difference between intensity and intimacy, between attachment and real devotion, between illusion and truth. As that understanding settles into you, the suffering slowly starts to loosen its grip. You might notice your thoughts about this person changing too. They stop feeling frantic or desperate. They arrive gently now, sometimes warm, sometimes clear, sometimes carrying a quiet acceptance that whatever happens next needs to come from authenticity, not fear. This is emotional maturity quietly forming inside you, and as that happens, the entire dynamic between you two starts to shift. Because when one side of a connection evolves, the whole structure responds to it. Energy naturally seeks balance. The moment you stop chasing answers and start actually living in your truth, everything around you slowly starts to reorganize itself. What once felt stuck starts moving again. What once felt confusing starts making sense in small, subtle ways. And they feel this shift too, even if they can't quite put their finger on why. Your energy no longer reaches them as need or desperation or pressure. It reaches them as presence, as calm strength, as something that can't be controlled or manipulated. And that kind of energy is far more powerful than pursuit ever was. Silence starts to mean something different now. It's no longer rejection. It becomes reflection instead. It becomes processing. It becomes the quiet space where their own inner truths finally have room to surface. In their own way, they're being asked to look inward and face whatever they've been avoiding. Old patterns of emotional distance, control, self-protection, these no longer serve the same purpose they used to. What once felt safe to them now starts to feel limiting instead. There are moments where they feel pulled toward you, followed by hesitation, followed again by reflection. That inner back and forth isn't really about you. It's about them standing at the edge of their own growth, unsure whether to step forward or stay where it's familiar. Moving forward requires vulnerability. Staying back requires a kind of quiet loss. And that tension can't sit unresolved forever. What matters most for you to understand right now is that how this connection turns out has nothing to do with how long you wait or how intensely you hope for a particular outcome. It depends entirely on how aligned you stay with yourself. The more grounded you remain in your own truth, the clearer everything becomes around you. Whether things lead back to reunion or toward release, either way, it won't break you the way it once might have. It will make you stronger instead. And somewhere inside you, there's already an understanding that this connection carries something unfinished. Not because it's designed to trap you in some repeating cycle, but because it's meant to bring truth out into the open. Words that were never spoken. Feelings that never got fully expressed. Choices that were delayed out of fear rather than clarity. None of that simply disappears on its own. It stays present, quietly, until it's finally acknowledged. Fear sits quietly at the center of this whole connection, waiting to be seen for what it is. Your fear has been about learning to trust your intuition without losing yourself in the process. Their fear has been about opening their heart without feeling like they're losing control. Both of these lessons are unfolding, each at their own pace, in their own time. You may start to notice that even the idea of reunion doesn't feel quite the same anymore. Not because you care any less, but because your standards have quietly evolved. You now value real depth over fantasy. You're no longer willing to mistake confusion for fate. What you want now is clarity, presence, consistency. Real, consistent effort, not just intensity dressed up as meaning. This isn't about pushing them away, it's about calling them into truth. A lot of people misunderstand what soul connections actually are, thinking they exist to be endured through suffering. But real connections were never built to trap you in pain. They exist to bring you back to yourself first, and only then, if it's meant to happen, back into alignment with each other in honesty. There may be moments ahead where communication opens up unexpectedly. A message that feels genuinely honest. A conversation that carries more sincerity than usual. A shift in energy that suddenly feels lighter, less weighed down than before. Don't rush any of these moments if they come. Let them unfold at their own pace. Real reconnection can't be forced into existence. And if fear rises up in you, fear of hoping again, fear of being let down a second time, let that fear exist without letting it take the wheel. Fear isn't actually a warning about what's coming. It's a memory of what already happened. You are not the same person you were when all of this started. You're more grounded now, more self-aware. You respect yourself more than you used to. You no longer need to prove your worth by waiting endlessly or enduring silently. Your worth has already shown itself through how much you've grown. Whether or not they choose to meet you at this new level is entirely up to them. But they will feel the difference in you, whether they say so or not. The universe doesn't really respond to longing. It responds to embodiment. And right now, you're embodying something new. Self-respect. Emotional steadiness. A calm sense of trust that's becoming your default state, rather than something you have to work at. Notice how your body actually reacts now when you think about them. Less tension, less urgency, more openness, more ease. That's alignment. That's your nervous system finally recognizing safety within itself, rather than searching for it externally. Again, what comes next isn't about more waiting. It's about letting life reveal what's real without you fighting it or forcing it. Letting love meet you exactly where you are now, instead of where you once abandoned yourself to keep something afloat. Letting this connection either rise into truth or dissolve into understanding, without bitterness attached to either outcome. And yet, some part of you still senses this isn't finished. Not yet. There's movement happening beneath the surface, courage slowly building, honesty quietly preparing itself to surface. Stay grounded through this. Stay steady. Whatever comes next will ask for discernment from you, not more endurance. You don't need outside reassurance anymore to trust what you already feel. Something inside you has settled into a quiet, steady trust. At this point, the connection doesn't feel like an open question anymore. It feels more like a mirror. And mirrors don't lie, they simply reflect exactly where you stand. You're starting to understand that this bond was never something meant to be chased down. It was meant to be met halfway. And meeting halfway can only really happen when both people are fully present within themselves first. You're no longer trying to explain your worth or defend how you feel to anyone. You simply know who you are, and you know how you love. That kind of inner grounding changes everything about the dynamic. When you stop twisting yourself into different shapes just to keep something alive, the connection either grows into honesty or it shows you its limits clearly. Both outcomes, honestly, are forms of truth. There's no real loss in truth, only clarity, which is its own kind of gift. The space you used to fill with constant effort looks different now. Not because your heart has shut down, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Your presence has become clearer, calmer, no longer distorted by fear the way it once was. And that kind of steady presence tends to bring everything unresolved right up to the surface. Whatever was avoided before can't stay hidden in quite the same way anymore. They may start to feel the full weight of everything that was never said, the contrast between what could have been and what actually is now. The reality of what's missing without you there the way you used to be. A sense of responsibility starts to stir in them, not guilt exactly, but awareness. Awareness of timing they let slip, choices they hesitated on, courage they kept postponing. Growth like this requires letting go of old defenses and finally stepping into vulnerability. And that kind of process can't be rushed, no matter how much either person wants it to move faster. What matters right now isn't speed, it's direction. And the direction is shifting. You might feel moments of closeness, even without any actual contact between you. A sense of warmth or calm, or a quiet kind of knowing that arrives out of nowhere. That's resonance, not your imagination running wild. When two people are genuinely connected on a deeper level, physical distance doesn't erase that connection. It only delays how it eventually gets expressed. But that expression is still coming, not through chaos or confusion, but through clarity. And when that clarity finally shows up, it won't ask you to make yourself smaller to fit it. You're no longer someone who settles for less than the truth. You understand now that love has to actually be lived out, not just quietly felt and never acted on. That's exactly why everything slowed down the way it did. Anything built before you reached this level of awareness simply wouldn't have been stable enough to last anyway. If they do come back, it won't be out of loneliness or confusion. It'll come from real intention, presence, accountability, a genuine willingness to meet you honestly, without games. And if they don't come back at all, you'll still be whole, because this connection has already done its deeper work in you, regardless of the outcome. It brought you back to yourself, gave you a stronger sense of identity, a clearer inner voice, a more stable emotional foundation to stand on. You understand now the real difference between attachment and alignment, between longing and actual love, between waiting around and simply honoring the timing of things. This isn't the end of your ability to love someone deeply. It's the refinement of it. And whatever comes next in your life will meet you exactly at this level of awareness you've reached. There's a quiet, calm confidence building inside you now, a feeling that says, I'll be okay either way this goes. That's not detachment, that's wholeness. You're no longer bargaining your worth based on how things turn out. You're standing fully in who you are, without needing anyone else's validation to hold that ground. And life, in response, is beginning to expand again. New thoughts, new energy, new clarity, all of it is starting to come back into your life. This isn't distraction, this is movement. It's proof that you're no longer trapped inside the same emotional loop, replaying the same feelings on repeat. You're walking forward with your life again, actually moving instead of standing still. Love that's truly meant for you doesn't require you to abandon yourself to keep it. It recognizes you fully, exactly as you are, without asking you to shrink or perform. Something is quietly preparing to resolve itself. Not through force, but through honesty. Not out of urgency, but because it's finally ready. Stay open. Stay grounded. Stay clear-headed through this. The final part of this unfolding is getting closer, and when it arrives, it won't feel like a shock. It'll feel like understanding. There's a point where the soul stops asking, "What's going to happen?" because it finally understands why everything happened the way it did in the first place. You're moving into that space right now, quiet, steady, deeply aware of yourself in a way you maybe weren't before. You're no longer gripping onto outcomes, trying to control how things unfold. You're aligned with truth instead, and truth moves at its own pace, in its own rhythm that can't be rushed. The delays you experienced were never a punishment. They were preparation, whether it felt that way at the time or not. If this connection had shown up any earlier, it wouldn't have had the strength to survive the unhealed patterns still sitting underneath the surface. Love needs a certain kind of maturity to hold its shape and actually last. And that maturity is exactly where you're standing now. You're no longer reaching out from a place of emptiness, hoping someone else will fill it. You're standing in fullness instead. And that shift, on its own, changes absolutely everything. Because love that's built to last doesn't come from chasing. It comes from resonance, a natural pull that doesn't need convincing. And that resonance is clear now, whether or not it's been spoken out loud yet. Silence doesn't feel safe to them anymore, not the way it used to. Distance doesn't feel protective either. It's starting to feel like loss instead. And loss has a way of waking up courage. Not the reckless, impulsive kind, but honest courage. The kind that comes from finally facing something instead of running from it. A realization is surfacing in them, slowly, that what was shared between you was rare, and it actually meant something. If they come back, it'll look different this time. And if they don't, you'll still be whole. Because you're no longer the version of yourself who needed someone else to feel complete. You've become steady within yourself now, and that's exactly where everything begins to change. You're learning something most people never fully grasp, that peace doesn't arrive when every question gets answered. It arrives when you stop needing the answer to feel safe inside yourself. That's the quiet shift happening in you right now. You're not waiting for a sign anymore. You're not refreshing your phone, replaying old conversations, trying to decode what a certain silence meant. You've simply settled into the knowing that whatever is real will reveal itself in its own time, without you having to chase it into existence. This is what wholeness actually looks like in practice. Not a dramatic transformation, not some overnight awakening, but a slow, steady return to yourself, day by day, thought by thought. You check in with your own peace before you check in with their silence. You measure your worth by your own growth, not by whether they've reached out. And that quiet independence is exactly what makes you magnetic in a way pursuit never could. Whatever unfolds from here, you already know how to hold yourself through it. That is the real gift this connection gave you.